Great. So today is our attempt to start to tackle some of these issues that these young people face. So firstly, I would love to start at the right tone, and that is a tone of gratitude. I'd like to thank the people at Mukha for providing the space. Thank you so much. They're always hospitable and willing to provide a space for these kind of events. Also to Aunt Shakira for being as diligent and motivating and inspiring for organizing events like this. If she doesn't do it, or someone like her doesn't do it, then these events don't happen. Thank you very much. Also to the Sheikh for joining us today. Thank you so much for putting yourself on the spot to answer some of the difficult questions that have been sent in today. So I'm very honored to introduce him and to be the host today. So Sheikh, I'm going to start with the questions that have been sent in. So the way that the event has been structured is that questions have been sent in. And the idea is that when we attend these kind of events, I do it myself, you become shy sometimes to ask the questions that matter the most. And sometimes these questions are the most simple questions. So what Aunt Shakira had a great idea, and the idea was to actually anonymize that process. So a few days before, she provided people the opportunity to send questions in, and we have a list of questions which we hope the Sheikh will help us to answer today. And I'm going to start with the first one, and what I will do is I'll provide you with the context behind each question, and then the question, Sheikh, you will elaborate and help us out with it further. So, question number one is, how do we remain calm in Muṣibah situations? Now, the context behind this is the person who asked this question sadly lost her dad due to a heart attack in 2017. And on the same year, her ex-fiancé left her. And in this stage, she was asking, how do I trust another man in my life? Or how can I tell if a man is being sincere and honest with me? So the question that came about from her was, how do we remain calm in a Muṣibah situation? Maybe Sheikh will start by explaining what is Muṣibah for the people of my home.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا ربنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من كرمك علما يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم طهر قلوبنا وأزل عيوبنا وتولنا بالحسنى وزينا بالتقوى واجمع لنا خيري الآخرة والأولى وارزقنا طاعتك ما أبقيتنا يا رحمن يا رحيم. Ameen. وبعد. That's just a prayer for the beginning. Before I answer the question, I would like to preface every answer by saying that the answers are based on what I have learned from the Islamic tradition. That being said, there are limitations to the answers, and those limitations are the limitations of my own knowledge and understanding. So if I am not able to fully or properly answer a question, then that is due to the limitations of my own knowledge. Muṣibah is an Arabic term, it's a Quranic term that basically means perceived difficulties. Something that seems outwardly as a difficult situation in the world. And the Quran says, there's an ayah in the second chapter of the Quran that says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Where Allah says, glad tidings be to those who, when they are afflicted with any difficulty or any affliction, they immediately respond by saying, from God we came and to God we shall return. Say in this verse of the Quran that they should say does not mean that they should utter with their tongues or lips. Because the statement is not what the Quran is saying is important. There's an Arabic proverb that says, إِنَّمَا الْكَلَامُ لَفِي الْفُؤَادِ وَإِنَّمَا جُعِلَ اللِّسَانُ عَلَى الْفُؤَادِ دَلِيلًا. That true speech is what exists in the heart. And the tongue is made as an instrument to express that speech that exists in the heart. If somebody takes a pin and they poke you and somebody says, ah, that sound, ah, is not important to what the person is feeling. And it could have been expressed in any other way, but the feeling that led to the expression of is what is important. If the person does not feel any pain, then the person would not be able to express anything, and therefore outwardly there will be no manifestation of pain. So when the Quran says, if they're afflicted by something, they say this statement, what the Quran is saying is those, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ, give them the glad tidings of Jannah, of paradise, those who, if they are afflicted with any difficulty, they say. Now say means two things in the verse. One is that they remind themselves, because people would always be overcome by great situations. Any situation that is too heavy on the emotions, that incites something like fear or love or something like that, it trumps consciousness in that moment. In that moment, the consciousness or rational thought or something like that goes to the background, and that emotion takes over that human being. And so they act on fear or something like that, and then it takes a while for them to come back to their state of normal consciousness, and then they can rationally work through what happened. So for people who are in that state where they're not yet in control spiritually over the self, that they can trump the greatest emotions like fear and love as soon as it happens, for those people the ayah is saying, those who remind themselves, after they recollect themselves, they remind themselves, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, from God we came and to God we will return. The second meaning of say is that those who are in the state of consciousness, that as soon as difficulty befalls them, they know that from God they came and to God they shall return. Now, when the Quran says this statement, بَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, give glad tidings to the people who respond to a difficult situation. By this recognition, the recognition is the solution for the problem. In other words, the Quran is saying to remind yourself that this world is not the place to expect calm or ease or the absence of difficulty. This is not the place for that. This is a temporary setup. The entire world is a temporary thing. And it's not the place to seek stability. It is not the place to seek comfort. It is not the place to seek ease. Some of the books of Islamic spirituality begins with the statement of the ulama reminding people that this world is daru tarhin la daru farhin. It is a place of agitation. It's not a place of merriment. And that it's a place of ittirab. Not a place it's a place of difficulty and constant changing circumstances. Now, you don't place something that you expect to be stable on something that is not stable. If somebody wants this cup of water not to spill, that's the hope. I don't want any of this water to come out of the glass. You don't look at the thing that is shaking and constantly changing and say, I'm going to place the water here, hoping that the result is it's not going to spill. That would be an irrational thing to do. So the hope of stability, the hope for the complete absence of any difficulty, to place that hope on anything in the world, which is a world of constantly changing circumstances, is an irrational thing to do. You are placing the hope for stability in something that's not stable. And the entire world with all of its elements is not stable. It's one of the eternal truths of all systems will acknowledge that nothing in the world is stable. If you place your hope for stability in wealth, for example, that's not going to happen. Traditionally, wealth is gold and silver. And the Arabic words for gold is dhahab, which means to go. And the word for silver is fidda, which means to flow away from you. You say fad al-ma, and the water is flowing, it's going away from you, it's not staying. وَذَهَبَ fulan, and if you say ذَهَبَ زَيْدٌ, you say that Zayd, dhahab, it means he went away. And that's the word for gold in Arabic, dhahab. Just as a reminder that these are not things that will remain with you. And same thing with any other thing that we place in the world. It's not going to give us any form of stability and calmness. So when the Quran says, those who are afflicted by difficulty, they either remind themselves or were already in the consciousness that they came from God and to God they will return, basically means those who are conscious of the fact that this world is temporary. And it was designed for difficulty. It wasn't designed for something else. And the desire for a thing to operate beyond its nature or out of its nature, or not out of the characteristic of it that it was inherently made with, is again something that is irrational. If you say, I hope that this horse behaves like a monkey, then that's never going to happen. Because it's not within the nature of a horse to behave like a monkey. It's not the nature of the world to produce stability. And so to hope that someday we would have some level of calmness or a constant level of calmness attached to the states of the world, that is something that's never going to happen. So that would be living in delusion. Any hope for stability, any hope for stability, calmness, serenity, has to be placed in something that is not constantly changing. The hope for that has to be attached to something that can be stable, that is within its nature to be stable. And that has to be something that is beyond the world, because we already established by observation that the world is not a place of stability. And so any hope for calmness will have to be placed outside of the world, in God, in hope for something that's lasting, the akhirah, rewards of heaven, inshaAllah ta'ala. There's a second aspect to this question that I'd like to talk about, and that is one of the things that make difficulties hard to bear is the way we perceive difficulties and the judgment that we give difficulties. And that is, most people would judge difficulties as bad, and the opposite of difficulties as good. Where is that judgment coming from? Every judgment must have a source. It must have a system that produces a judgment. Judgments cannot just come about. And so, based on the source of a judgment, that is how we can judge the truth value of a judgment. If somebody says, for example, the boy is good, first of all, they need to know what the boy is and what good is. But to know what good is not easy. That needs an entire system of thought with interconnected elements to produce a statement like good or bad. And there are different sources of judgments. We have, for example, the alethic modalities in traditional philosophy that talks about truth. Something being necessary, possible, impossible, contingent, and the likes. Then we have judgments that for some people are ethical, and for other people it's not. For example, we have a judgment that X is good as opposed to something else is bad. And for some systems of thought, that is a rational judgment. And for others, it's a legalistic judgment. And then you have epistemic judgments, like if you say X is known as opposed to X is thought or, believed. This is believed about that. That's a judgment that necessitates research. Judgments of good and bad in the Islamic tradition, there are three types of good and bad as judgments in the Islamic conception of good and bad. There are good and bad that relate simply to what the human self is attracted to, universally, all peoples, and that which they find reprehensible by nature. There's not something they're taught. If you go to any society, any race of people, any culture, different people who are exposed to different knowledge structures, and you ask them, is having a good night's sleep good as opposed to bad? Most of them may say yes. Something like that. To starve a child until it dies, is that good or bad? These types of things can be known rationally. So the judgment good and bad can be rationally ascertained. Then you have a second category of that which makes something its best form as opposed to something that makes it its worst form. So all peoples can acknowledge that knowledge in a person is good while ignorance in a person is not good. Those are also rationally ascertained. But then there's a third category of good and bad. That category of what is praiseworthy and what is blameworthy, and what necessitates punishment and what necessitates rewards. That category of good and bad from the Islamic tradition can only be determined by revelation. That's not in the realm of man to decide. So, difficulties, some of them can be necessarily bad, but most of them are not. It's a judgment that we make that is not coming from religion or reason, but from a normative state that we have come to expect of the world. So we may judge a bad thing as good and a good thing as bad, but in reality it's not good and it's not bad. The Quran says, for example, عَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. It may be that you love something, you desire for X to be, but it is bad for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. And it may be that you hate something, but it is good for you. Allahu ya'lamu wa antum la ta'lamun. God knows and you know not. There's the story of that demonstrates this from the Zen master. They said that there's this Zen master and a village, and there's a prince, and all of the people of the village, they love the prince. And they want the prince to be happy in whatever they conceive happy to be. And the prince wanted a horse that the father is not buying for him. And so the prince becomes very sad. And everybody in the village is very sad. So they went to the Zen master and said, it's such a bad thing that the father is not buying the horse for the boy, and the boy is in this prolonged state of sadness. So the Zen master said, it's not bad, let's just wait and see. So they waited, the boy persisted in asking for the horse. The father bought the horse, the boy became happy, everybody in the village is happy. So they went to the Zen master and said, oh, what a good thing happened, and they labeled it good. The boy is happy. The Zen master said, it's not good, let's just wait and see. The boy is riding the horse, he fell off of the horse, he broke his leg. If he didn't get the horse, he wouldn't have broken his leg. The boy is sad because his leg is broken, the whole village is sad. They went to the Zen master, such a bad thing happened, the boy broke his leg. The Zen master said, we don't know if it's bad, just wait and see. The empire went into war, and there's an order that came around for all able-bodied men of a certain age to go to war and fight. The boy was exempted because of the injury. They went to the Zen master and said, oh, what a good thing happened. He said, we don't know, just wait and see. So the idea is we don't know at any transcendental level what is good and what is bad. And so when it comes to, for example, the Islamic conception of the world and the afterlife, we don't know if a bad thing that happens in this world would be what brings about salvation in the next world. Because we know, for example, there are benefits to tribulations. There are many benefits of tribulations. Some of our ulama, they wrote entire volumes of books just saying what are the good aspects of tribulations. One, for example, is that it causes a person to develop patience. And patience is heavy in the akhirah. It causes rida. It forces somebody to accept the situation that they are in, to be pleased with the will of God. That weighs heavy in the akhirah. God describes the sick person as being with him. Ma'iyya. There's a companionship. Allah Ta'ala says, I am with the people who are in tribulation, as opposed to people who are not in tribulation. They have a normal relationship with God. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, somebody will be brought to Allah, and Allah would say that, I was sick and you didn't visit me. And the person would say, how can you be sick? You're the Lord of the heavens and the earth. Allah would say, didn't you know that my servant so-and-so was sick? Had you visited him, you would have found me there. Obviously not physical, because physicality is impossible for Allah Azza wa Jal. But the idea is that companionship of Allah is with the sick people. And there are many other benefits of tribulation. One of it, and the most important of it, is it detaches a person from dunya. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Man yuhib liqa Allah, ahabba Allah liqa'ah. Whoever desires to go back to Allah, Allah desires to meet that person. وَمَنْ كَرِهَ لِقَاءَ اللَّهِ كَرِهَ اللَّهُ لِقَاءَهُ. Whoever dislikes coming back to Allah, Allah dislikes meeting that person. If we are comfortable here, there is less desire to go back there. And so if Allah loves a servant and wants him to desire coming back to Allah, then Allah makes dunya difficult for him. So that there's a desire to go back and there is no comfort and desire to stay. And these are just four of the, there are many other benefits of tribulations. So we may outwardly look at it as a bad thing. عَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا. You may hate it, وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. But it is good for you. So that judgment of it being bad is not a true judgment. It is not a true judgment. If we realize that we don't know if it is good and bad, but how we respond to it can make it good, or how we respond to it can make it bad, then it gives us the motivation to respond in a way that makes that situation good. Because having or not having, in and of themselves, by the nature of it, is neither good or bad. Money can be very bad in the akhirah, as the lack of money can also be very bad in the akhirah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that poverty, shaitan, if he wants to get people to do extreme wickedness, he threatens them with poverty. So poverty is something that's difficult. But he also talks about the people of poverty entering Jannah 70 years before the people of wealth. Poverty is neither good nor bad in and of itself. How we respond to it can make it good or bad. Same thing with wealth. And then all of it is a test. We've come to understand that difficulty is a test. But non-difficulty, that's not a test. And this is absolutely not true. Health is a test from Allah. Wealth is a test from Allah. Comfort is a test from Allah. To be in a state of calm in the dunya is a test from Allah. As the opposites are also tests from Allah. Because the tests of Allah, it tests two things. It tests gratitude and it tests perseverance. And so people of difficulty, their sabr is tested, and the people of ease, their shukr is tested. And the ulama, they differ as to who is best, the ghaniyu shakir or the faqir sabir. The wealthy person who is grateful, is he of a higher stature with Allah, or the person of difficulty who is patient? And majority say the rich person who is thankful, because that's more difficult. It's more difficult to be thankful to God if you see yourself as not needing God. While people who are in difficult situations would turn to God faster once they run out of all means. So difficulties are neither good nor bad in and of themselves. How we respond to them make them good or bad. And number two, how to deal with difficulties is to spiritually develop the state of consciousness where we know with absolute certainty that this life is temporary and what really matters is the akhirah. Let me just speak 2 minutes to the context. People are difficult to deal with. How do you know if people are sincere? That's hard. Are people going to burn you? Absolutely yes. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that was narrated by Abu Dharr al-Ghifari that people are like 100 camels. In every 100, you may find one of them that's proper for riding. In other words, in 100 people, you may be able to find one proper one that's not going to. And there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ukhbur taqli." That ukhbur means get experience with people, taqli, and you will come to dislike them because of the way people are going to be. So don't expect that you're not going to be burned by people. How do you know if they're sincere or not? From their actions and from their words, but not when they're talking consciously. Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, one of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the true nature of a person is known from the slip of the tongues and from the facial expressions. When the tongues slip and they let out something true, when they're angry, or when they experience fear, or when they think nobody is observing them, and so you listen for those moments. And from the facial expressions. Because a person can control their tongue most of the times if they want to con you, but a lot of the facial expressions they can't control all the time. So observe, be observant of people. And inshallah also just make dua to be guided to sincere people.